Our story starts with our protagonist, Nemu, in the dungeon, saving Garen by attending his wounds. Garen grins in relief after being saved. The moment is simple. Garen's escape feels possible again, yet Nemu's calm makes it clear she's here for more than rescuing. Garen introduces himself and offers a reward pouch, trying to understand what brought Nemu down here. Nemu stays focused and says she's searching for something that isn't treasure or rare materials. The answer lands bluntly, shutting down his assumption. Nemu turns and names her purpose without hesitation. The word is stark against the dungeon's quiet. She is here for a corpse. It's not framed as tragedy or heroism, only as a target that must be found. Garen can't process it at first, questioning why this would be anyone's job. Nemu doesn't waver and confirms it plainly. The label settles over her work, corpse bearer. Garen's confusion grows as Nemu treats it like ordinary labor. When Nemu moves to continue, Garen panics and begs to be taken to the surface. His pleas escalate into desperate offers, trying to buy safety with everything he has. Nemu answers without softness, insisting she still has work to do. Garen ends up strapped into Nemu's frame as she walks on. The arrangement turns his survival into cargo, carried with steady step. Even while he stays tense, the motion is controlled and practiced, as if this burden is nothing new to Nemu. Garen fumbles Nemu's name, switching titles and nicknames, but Nemu corrects him again and again. He worries about her pace and direction. Nemu refuses to slow down and makes it simple. If Garen hates it, Garen can get off. Their talk shifts from rumors to reasons. Garen presses for why Nemu chose this work, and Nemu answers in clipped truth: money, then loneliness. Garen pushes for more conversation, but Nemu keeps moving, offering only what she's willing to give. An explanation breaks down the job's reality. The remains are valuable, but the risks are ugly. Disease, transformation, and the smell itself. That burden is why the pay rises. The message is practical, framing corpse work as profit bought with danger. Garen blurts that Nemu seems normal for someone with her reputation, then scrambles to justify what he meant. Nemu repeats the word and doesn't take offense. Nemu shows no interest in performing fear, only in doing the job and ignoring judgment. Garen insists Nemu needs rest, but Nemu refuses and decides to set Garen down briefly. In the same space, a clawed foot appears on the stone, hinting at something nearby. The conversation falters as the dungeon's threat quietly steps into view. A massive reptile beast drops into the scene, looming over Nemu with saliva hanging from its jaws. Nemu faces it from below, weapon held steady. The beast acknowledges a newcomer, and the space tightens into a clear confrontation. The beast gapes wide and movement erupts. A warning to run appears, but Nemu stays and identifies the creature as the biggest threat on this floor. Garen demands to know what it is. Nemu answers with action, claiming unfinished business with it. The clash peaks in a sudden impact, the beast's body recoiling as a heavy blow lands. The moment is punctuated by a shouted challenge. The force and framing show control shifting toward Nemu, even as the creature's bulk still dominates the scene. Garen stands stunned with weapon raised, words breaking into disbelief. Nemu, dirtied and marked from the fight, responds with a simple readiness to continue. The background suggests the threat has been brought down, and Nemu's posture stays unshaken. Before Garen can recover, Nemu moves to butcher the fallen creature. The work is brisk and practical, turning danger into material. Garen protests repeatedly, but Nemu continues anyway, treating the aftermath as routine labor rather than something to fear. Nemu strains with effort and then confirms the discovery. She found the target. The scene centers on the retrieved body and Nemu's certainty. With the search completed, the goal shifts from fighting to transporting what was recovered back to the surface. Ashley's body is shown clearly, and Nemu states Ashley is the contracted target this time. The moment is quiet and factual, anchoring the job to a person. Nemu's focus stays on confirmation and the next step, not on speeches or ceremony. A narrated past appears. Ashley's family business struggled, and Ashley was known as hardworking and kind. Ashley entered the dungeon hoping to help, then vanished without a return. The images lock the loss in place, connecting the contract to a lived life. The narration ties the job to the family's last money, explaining it was used to hire Nemu. The shop is shown winding down. In the present, Garen quietly acknowledges the reality. Nemu's small reaction shows the weight of what's being handled. Garen notices an item and asks what it is, but Nemu can't identify it. A number marking is shown close, offering detail without explanation. The moment is small, yet it emphasizes how much remains unknown even when the target has been found. Nemu finishes securing Ashley's body, tightening bandages and preparing the frame for transport. With the work done, Nemu announces the return. Ashley's covered face appears as the load is set, turning grief into something that must be carried back. Garen holds Ashley on the frame as Nemu carries them through the tunnel, although Nemu isn't complaining even while straining. The words sound like self-control under pressure. The return march continues, the tunnel swallowing sound as the burden presses forward. The exit light grows ahead. Garen presses a hand against the carried load and admits relief that Ashley was found. The statement is simple and grounded. The walking doesn't stop, but the mood shifts into the heavy quiet of completion. Near the exit, Garen calls out to Nemu and comments on the mask, calling it creepy. Nemu answers with a questioning pause. The moment highlights how Nemu's tools and appearance trigger reactions, even from someone who just depended on Nemu to survive. Nemu explains explains the mask is worn while carrying a corpse, partly to hide Nemu's face from those who recoil. Garen questions the timing. Nemu answers without emotion and points to the destination. The guild has finally been reached, where people will judge on sight. Inside the guild hall, Garen pushes toward reporting the job, but the crowd notices Nemu immediately. Questions rise into accusation, and people claim they can smell death. The entrance becomes a spotlight, turning Nemu's work into public confrontation. Shouts explode around them, ordering them out and hurling insults at a corpse bearer. Garen's face shows strain under the pressure, caught in the noise. Nemu stays hooded behind, absorbing the hostility without responding. As the crowd closes in, Nemu's masked face fills the scene, still and watchful. The crowd remains packed together, and Garen breaks away toward a doorway. Nemu stands at the threshold, creating distance from the mob. The movement signals a shift from public attack to private aftermath. Quieter space, Garen calls to Nemu and offers something to use. Nemu questions whether Garen understands what's meant. Garen asks for a second and reaches toward Nemu's face area, attempting to help with the mask and what it carries. Garen says the thing matters to Nemu and demonstrates wiping it, rubbing close. Nemu's eyes widen with sweat visible, and Nemu asks what's wrong. The gesture, meant as support, lands sharply, and Nemu's reaction shows immediate discomfort. Garen warns not to do that because it will get dirty, but Nemu snaps and demands it back. Garen stalls and apologizes. Nemu then asks where Garen is going, the tension still hanging as they shift position and prepare to move on. Enter a guild office space, and Garen asks if this is the place. A clerk responds with approval and attention, signaling the report is official now. The environment turns procedural, but the carried outcome remains heavy in the background. Garen reports the target found, and the clerk confirms it. The next step is contact, and the parents appear, saying they have been waiting the whole time. Their expressions show dread and urgency, the contract becoming a family's moment of truth. The parents call Ashley their only daughter and demand identification. As Nemu and Garen approach, the mother recoils and yells not to touch. Fear collides with grief, and the distance between them becomes physical, even though everyone is there for the same reason. Shiny ore is revealed, and the parents say Ashley was clutching it. The mother identifies it as mithril, and the father reacts with shock, calling it a treasure. The discovery reframes Ashley's last action, tying the dungeon's danger to desperate value. In flashback, Ashley promises to bring back rare ore worth a lot of money, and insists Ashley won't go alone. A parent responds, and the shop's importance is stated plainly. The images show Ashley leaving with confidence, while worry lingers in the home behind. Ashley waves and announces departure, smiling. Later, the parents hold the ore and whisper Ashley's name. The close-ups focus on hands and faces, turning the object into a symbol of what was chased and what it cost, without needing any extra explanation. Back in the guild, the label corpse bearer hangs over Nemu's present. Nemu pauses with a small question as the parents stare. A tight close-up of clenched hands shows tension through grip alone, capturing how fragile this meeting remains even after confirmation. Mother cries and thanks them, words breaking through the grief. Nemu sits under the hooded mask and then shows a small smile. The shift is subtle but visible, marking a rare moment where Nemu's work is met with gratitude instead of revulsion. Nemu turns the reward matter back to guild procedure, speaking about preparing it through the office. An attendant guides the parents away. Garen watches as a door closes, the sound ending the meeting. The scene narrows to what remains unresolved between Nemu and Garen. At home, Ashley lies covered on a table. The mother leans in and says, "Welcome home." The room is bare and quiet, and the posture shows closeness and grief without movement. The words function like a final greeting rather than a reunion. Outside, Garen calls after Nemu and tries to follow. Nemu tells Garen to file a request with the guild, keeping distance and continuing forward. Garen refuses and says other adventurers can't be trusted. Nemu answers bluntly, then give up. Garen reveals the real motive. Garen is searching for a sister missing for a year in this country. Nemu calls Garen a pest, but Garen escalates, offering anything and demanding attention. Nemu cuts it off mid-line, refusing to be pulled in. Garen is suddenly face down on the ground, begging, body flattened in a deliberate posture. Nemu looks down with a questioning mark, the confusion clear in the framing. No cause is shown here, only the act itself, forcing the moment into stillness. Garen explains the posture as the most sincere form of begging from Garen's homeland. Nemu asks what Garen is doing and tells Garen to stop and leave. A few days later appears, and a small sound of irritation punctuates the end of the exchange. After the time skip, Garen reappears, leaning against a wall, with arms crossed and a grin, greeting Nemu casually. Below, Nemu advances with the frame and hood. The composition shows Garen's persistence and Nemu's refusal to stop moving. Near the dungeon entrance, signs of a campfire are noted, and the entrance label stands clear. Nemu's internal text admits Garen will keep following even if ignored. Nemu lets out a small sound, the resignation shown through posture and close-up. Inside the stone entry corridor, Nemu walks forward with the frame and lantern, hood up. Garen follows behind and finally stops arguing, offering a short concession. The direction is set, both move toward the dungeon again, with Garen trailing Nemu's path. In a quiet room, the client lays out the claim. The daughter vanished on her wedding day. Nemu focuses on the reward and demands detail, while a photo of the bride sets the face of the target. Garen listens, already uneasy. The story story flashes back to the wedding. A strange man appears, the bride is seized, and pursuit fails across town. The trail ends at the dungeon, where even private soldiers lose them. Back in the room, the client finishes the account. Nemu makes her role clear. She retrieves the dead, not the living. When asked if the daughter is dead, Nemu answers that it's most likely. Garen snaps into protest, demanding how she can say that with certainty. Garen clings to the idea she might return, but the timeline is blunt. 7 days with no sight of her leaving the dungeon. The question shifts to resources. Why not hire stronger adventurers? Yet the choice has already been made. The client places trust in them, and Nemu accepts without hesitation. Nemu's goal is simple: find the daughter quickly. A final warning follows them to the door, while Garen's expression hints he still doesn't like where this is heading. Outside, Nemu demands to know why Garen keeps following. Garen complains it's cruel to push him away, then loudly declares they're a party. Nemu doesn't argue. She lets it happen with a flat dismissal, keeping momentum. Garen pushes for closeness and finally gives his name, printed as Garensis, then insists Nemu can call him Garen. Nemu reacts sharply, and Garen scolds her for not remembering. A new lead appears, a clothing store. Inside the shop, the rat-headed owner stiffens at Nemu's request. Nemu demands everything that came in over the last 7 days and orders the owner not to touch anything. The search becomes methodical, treating fabric like evidence. Rows of clothing fill a back room, and Garen guesses they're items waiting to be repaired. A hand tugs at cloth, and the discovery sparks a startled reaction. The air shifts from routine sorting to the sense that something specific is here. A wedding dress hangs in full view, instantly tying the room to the missing bride. Garen concludes they changed clothes, and the dress becomes proof of movement rather than a random item. The search tightens around what happened after the wedding. Garen is shocked they're leaving so soon, but Nemu decides the clue is enough. Outside, Garen keeps pressing, calling to her and urging a rush to the dungeon. Nemu answers minimally, while a small aside brands Garen as annoying. They descend through stone corridors, and Garen questions the route. Nemu insists the path is fine today, brushing off the doubt. The choice feels deliberate, as if Nemu is guiding them towards something more than a simple downward climb. Garen notices Nemu's confidence and suspects she already knows the direction. Nemu flips it back at him, asking if he thinks he knows the culprit. Then Nemu reveals the floor's key feature, a passage that connects to the outside. A cutaway view shows the dungeon isn't only depth, it can lead sideways. Nemu explains there's a kind of exit, though reaching it may be impossible. The theory forms, someone could use that route to leave town, if they knew how. Garen bolts ahead to check, ignoring warnings to wait. Nemu calls out, and the corridor opens into danger. Garen stumbles mid-run, anger flashing as momentum turns into a mistake. The rush creates the opening the dungeon was waiting for. A trap erupts, an explosive burst across the corridor with heavy impact effect. The space becomes a blur of motion and sound, forcing both of them into survival position. The forward charge collapses into immediate defense. Nemu snaps at Garen for freezing and orders him behind her. Garen blurts out that the exit is right there, but the corridor is still hostile. A violent reaction fills the moment as they realize the exit is guarded by hidden threat. Nemu moves in a sweeping defensive motion, while something dangerous cuts through the air. Garen ducks low, pinned to survival by Nemu's command. The attack passes close enough to make the corridor feel like a firing lane, not a hallway. After the barrage, Nemu steadies herself with a long pole while Garen struggles on the floor. Nemu identifies the hazard as poison needles, and Garen repeats the word like he can't believe it. The danger shifts from impact to lingering harm. Nemu scolds him for not waiting, and Garen answers with a weak apology. Nemu explains the door will open on its own because the room is common, then warns the poison is slow but fatal over time. Survival becomes a waiting game. When the room settles, 2 slumped bodies come into view, seated side by side. Nemu notes they likely died the same way. She calls them probable search targets, turning the trap's cruelty into evidence that the missing bride's story may already be ending. With time forced on them, Nemu calmly eats, shocking Garen into disbelief. Nemu explains the rule: eat when you can. Garen can't reconcile the practicality with the scene, but the need to endure is visibly overriding discomfort. A sound interrupts the waiting, and Nemu repeatedly tells him to hold on. Garen questions what she's eating, and Nemu names emergency ration. Nemu offers him some, reframing food as function, while the approaching noise keeps tension alive. Garen switches the meal, presenting something he made himself, and urging Nemu to take a bite. A simple ingredient list makes it feel real and prepared, not scavenged. Nemu tastes it, and the small moment of eating becomes unexpected relief in the trap room. Nemu's reaction is immediate and visible as she chews, startled by the flavor. Garen asks if it was good, and Nemu answers simply. Then Nemu returns to the case, questioning why a corpse bearer was requested at all, and Garen admits he doesn't get it. Nemu lays out the contradiction. The kidnapping story was a lie. Nemu points to what the parents don't want revealed and links it to their choice of hiring her. The wedding dress becomes key evidence, clean and intact, not torn by struggle. A new theory forms in images. The daughter likely ran willingly with a lover, turning kidnapping into elopement. They make it into the dungeon together, only to fall into a trap. The escape becomes a misstep, and the path ends underground. The bodies are shown again, framed as an end reached together. A warning comes as the door begins opening, forcing movement. The idea lands that they stayed side by side until the last moment, and that closeness becomes the center of what happens next. Nemu states her duty is to bring the daughter back, even if it means separating the dead. Garen begs her to reconsider and offers excuses and persuasion. Nemu refuses with a hard no, grounding everything in what the parents demanded. Nemu's argument sharpens into accusation. The parents' demand is selfishness, not respect. Nemu insists ignoring the daughter's will isn't honoring the dead. She warns Garen not to twist the meaning and frames their task as obligation, not a memorial. Nemu defines honoring the dead as something for those left behind, then asks to do her job. A quiet apology follows, small against the harsh stance. Garen's face shows the conflict, while his thought labels the choice as selfishness, stuck between duty and sympathy. Garen spots something on the body, an item that matches what was on the daughter. Nemu recognizes it instantly, and the evidence clicks into place. The discovery shifts the situation from theory to confirmation, tying the dead in the room directly to the missing bride. Nemu ends the discussion and orders they leave. Garen agrees, and they move through the opening with a final burst of urgency. The exit is no longer a goal to chase blindly, it's simply the way out with proof in hand. Back with the client, confirmation is delivered, and Nemu answers questions without drama. The client asks where Garensis is, and Nemu says he's outside. Then Nemu cuts to the remaining mystery, asking what happened to the supposed kidnapper. A close-up lingers on the evidence, small, undeniable, and personal. Then, the conclusion lands cleanly. There was no kidnapper. The case collapses into a different truth than the one they were hired to chase, leaving the lie exposed in a single sentence. From a high overlook, the pair searched the distant landscape. Someone called to Nemu and pressed her to confirm what she could see. The job already felt like it depended on spotting a single, hidden detail far below. They narrowed the location, but the corpse couldn't be seen from here, blocked by a building silhouette. With the target confirmed only by intel and distance, the explanation began, shifting them from guessing to committing. Back in the briefing, the broker laid it out plainly. This job was harder than normal. The body was pinned beneath collapsed structure, discovered already dead. What began as a search had turned into something uglier, and monsters had gathered around it. Back in the briefing, the broker laid it out plainly. This job was harder than normal. The body was pinned beneath collapsed structure, discovered already dead. What began as a search had turned into something uglier, and monsters had gathered around it. At the site, ghouls swarmed the ruined area. Garen tried to dismiss them as ordinary, but Nemu corrected him. These weren't normal. The threat had a name, and it meant the fight wouldn't stay simple for long. Nemu explained the danger. Cutting these creatures only multiplied the problem unless they were erased completely. The clean solutions required extreme methods, or magic. Neither of them could use it, leaving only grit, risk, and imperfect choices. With no easy answer, they chose the blunt one. They would force a path through the nest, no matter how messy it became. Nemu's approach was straightforward. Keep cutting until there was space to reach the body. The swarm reacted the moment they moved. Shapes lunged and twisted through the rubble, claws and bodies colliding in frantic motion. The fight turned chaotic fast, the kind where the smallest opening could decide everything. Garen steadied himself and committed. He leaned into the danger instead of hesitating, bracing for impact and pushing forward. Whatever waited near the collapsed house, they were going to reach it by sheer momentum. A sharp command kicked them into motion. They surged ahead, cutting into the pack and driving the ghouls back by force. The moment of hesitation ended, replaced by a hard sprint through bodies and debris. They rounded the corner toward the collapsed house, and the target point finally came into view. The corpse was there, buried in the wreckage. With enemies closing, they shifted from fighting to extraction, fighting for seconds. In the middle of the rush, Garen realized he was barehanded. Missing gloves meant every grab and pull was worse than it should have been. The mistake hit at the worst time, with no chance to stop and fix it. The swarm punished him for it. Garen took blows and grit his teeth through the pain, cursing as he forced himself upright. He didn't retreat, he kept moving, pushing his body forward while the monsters pressed in. Something changed, an unexpected moment that made him freeze in surprise. Whether it was an opening or a sudden shift in the fight, it forced him to look again. The next move had to be immediate, or they'd lose it. A tight exchange confirmed the window. They shouted for speed, calling to Nemu and urging her to move. The tone wasn't strategy anymore, it was urgency, the kind that comes when success is inches away and danger is at your back. Garen strained with a raw, wordless effort. Every muscle in his frame showed the weight and pressure of the moment. The job wasn't just fighting, it was hauling something precious out of a place that wanted to swallow it. The retrieval finally clicked into place. Someone called out that it was secured, and the decision was immediate. Pull out now. With the goal in hand, the fight shifted into escape, trading victory for survival. They ran. The movement became relentless, a single stream of retreat through broken ground. Behind them, the threat refused to stay down, and the only thing that mattered was distant, enough space to breathe without claws at their heels. The warnings came fast, don't look back, just run. The ghouls were regenerating, and the corpse's weight dragged at every step. Still, the order was absolute, don't drop it. The bundle was the job, and the job came first. They broke free, gasping. Garen's relief was immediate, but it soured as he acknowledged what they'd carried, something badly damaged damaged, leaking decay and leaving stains behind. Surviving the nest didn't erase the horror of what they'd retrieved. Nemu explained the bag's purpose. It could slow the body's deterioration, but it couldn't undo what was already done. Garen called the work brutal, and Nemu treated that as normal. His attempt at praise landed awkwardly, and tension flickered. Garen suggested meeting the requester, imagining gratitude after such effort. Nemu shut that down with a quiet rule of the trade: both sides avoid contact. It wasn't politeness, it was protection, learned the hard way. Nemu named the role plainly: corpse bearer. Garen reacted to her sigh like it was a personal insult, demanding an explanation. Nemu offered none beyond silence, and that emptiness said more than any argument. They returned with the body, and the household immediately focused on who had arrived. Nemu identified the grieving mother. The room's attention fixed on the bundle, and the air of routine delivery began to crack under anticipation. Garen asked for confirmation and tried to be respectful, presenting the body for her to acknowledge. The mother's response was quiet but decisive. This was her child. The moment locked the missing into found, and the weight of that settled in. She spoke of her son, and Garen hurried to reassure her, emphasizing that the retrieval had been difficult, but her small interruptions broke his rhythm. The exchange stopped feeling like a handoff and started feeling like a trigger. The grief turned sharp. The mother lashed out and shouted for them not to touch him. Garen recoiled in shock, demanding to know what she was doing, his face caught between disbelief and the sudden threat. Garen tried to keep distance, but another family member surged in, armed and furious. Accusations flew, condemning corpse bearers and blaming them for death itself. The confrontation hardened, turning the delivery into a hostile standoff. Garen exploded, shouting that they had risked their lives to bring the son back. He condemned the father's treatment of them, refusing to accept the blame. The body lay nearby, silent, as the living fought over what it meant. In the heat of it, Garen admitted the brutal truth, that they were the ones who ended the monsters and caused the death's finality. Nemu cut in, ordering him to calm down and physically pulling him away before the fight got worse. Nemu moved close and shut him down with a blunt command. Garen struggled, face strained, but the restraint didn't loosen. With steady force, Nemu dragged him out, prioritizing escape from the scene over winning the argument. Outside, Garen choked on the hold, protesting as he was pulled along the ground. Doors shut behind them, sealing the conflict inside. The separation was complete. Only the two of them remained, with the noise replaced by distance. Garen demanded an explanation for being manhandled. Nemu apologized immediately, but Garen's frustration spilled out. He couldn't accept being blamed after what they'd survived. His anger wasn't abstract, it was tied to the way they'd been treated. A recalled voice reframed everything. The mother's words weren't pure accusation, they were apology and self-blame, regret for not stopping what happened. Hearing it in his mind, Garen repeated the apology back, quieter now, the rage losing ground. Garen clenched his fist and cursed under his breath, then admitted he'd cooled down. Nemu checked him calmly, keeping the conversation steady. The storm hadn't vanished, but it had shifted from shouting to reflection. Nemu explained the cruel hinge of these requests. Until someone sees the body, certainty doesn't exist. People keep hoping reality is wrong, even if it hurt. Garen questioned the logic, and Nemu pointed out that anger alone doesn't change it. Nemu summed it up with a single, heavy truth. This job meant carrying the weight of grief, denial, and blame. The statement didn't excuse what happened, it simply described the burden they'd signed up to hold. Garen finally understood why corpse bearers avoid meeting requesters. Even so, he tried to argue that getting angry was pointless, then stopped himself mid-thought. The understanding didn't erase what he'd felt, it just made the situation clearer. Garen changed direction completely. If anyone mistreated Nemu again, he said he would get angry, without hesitation. It wasn't about pride anymore, it was about refusing to accept that kind of treatment as normal. A silent montage surrounded Nemu, with harsh fragments, hands, faces, and moments that implied past hostility. Nemu stood at the center, still and covered, as if those memories clung to the cloak itself. No words were needed for the weight to register. Nemu acknowledged Garen's stance with a neutral reply, and Garen doubled down. He'd be really angry. He urged them to go home, still visibly irritated, voice loud and sharp. Nemu followed, steady, letting him burn it out. As night opened above the rooftops, Nemu's expression softened, just a brief real smile. Garen caught it and lit up, shocked and excited, complaining he didn't see enough. Nemu shut him down, but the warmth lingered as they left. After days of searching, Garen and Nemu slumped beside a small fire and admitted the trip had turned into a complete bust. The disappointment sat heavy, but their exhaustion was louder. With the pot still hanging, they tried to regroup. They accepted the loss and decided to return to town to investigate again. Then Nemu paused, sensing a voice nearby. Garen followed her attention, wary but ready, as the quiet around their camp suddenly felt occupied. Garen called out quickly, insisting he wasn't hostile. From the darkness ahead, a trembling voice begged them not to attack and promised to come out slowly. With the clearing still empty, the unseen speaker controlled the moment through sheer caution. Something crawled into view, corpse-like and grinning, and greeted them like this was normal. It even announced itself as a corpse. Garen snapped into panic, shouting that it was undead, while the creature's calm cheerfulness only made it stranger. The corpse begged them to lower their weapons and insisted it wasn't a dangerous kind. It claimed it wasn't undead at all, then jumped straight to business, saying it wanted to make a request. It even identified Nemu as a corpse bearer. The creature introduced itself as Fumir, an elf who was technically dead. It spoke proudly of researching resurrection and magic, while Nemu and Garen struggled to accept what they were hearing. A talking corpse wasn't something either of them treated as normal. Fumir insisted it wasn't common at all, then launched into the theory behind healing magic with sudden excitement. Garen flinched at the energy shift, demanding to know why Fumir was here. The question landed like a trigger for a long explanation. Fumir described studying unusual soil and how magic interacted with corpse condition. It stressed that magic wasn't omnipotent and couldn't bring dead beings back to life. When Garen implied the research revived it, Fumir denied it and got visibly flustered. Fumir showed the grim aftermath of its experiments and the attack that nearly killed it. It explained that undead were controlled by parasitic organisms and the corpse itself had no will. Then it stated clearly that it still had its own will. Fumir said it had been on the verge of completing its research when Nemu and Garen appeared. With only its upper body functional, it asked them to help finish the work. Garen demanded the details, forcing the request into the open. Nemu admitted she couldn't use magic, but Fumir begged anyway, pleading for someone to collect the final material. It warned its magic would likely wear off by tomorrow and claimed the medicine could save children weakened by magical power depletion. Fumir's desperate plea hung in the air. Garen urged Nemu to help, calling her out directly and pushing for action. Nemu didn't answer immediately, but her silence carried weight as if she was measuring the cost before deciding. Nemu agreed on the condition they'd be paid properly. When Fumir called her Missy, she corrected it and stated her name, Nemu. Fumir thanked her enthusiastically, and Garen's loud celebration earned a sharp warning to stop yelling. They arrived at a cliffside pool thick with concentrated magical power. The drop looked deep, but the target was worse, a plant growing at the bottom. The plan was simple: get down first, then dig it up, even if the terrain fought them. Nemu handed over a rope and Garen took charge, eager to descend. Fumir doubted his sincerity, but Garen said the desperation had moved him. With a wide grin, he insisted a little help wouldn't hurt, even as the risk became obvious. At the bottom, Fumir described a buried marker shaped like a burr and a large scar-marked rock to guide them. Garen braced himself, found the rock, and began digging in earnest. A small marked piece in his hand confirmed he had the right spot. 40 minutes passed with nothing to show. Garen shouted in frustration while Fumir casually cited that it was buried around 50 years ago. Nemu checked in, and Garen admitted the approach wasn't working. He said they had to rethink fast. The strain hit Garen hard. Blood ran from his nose as his eyes widened. From above, someone yelled at him to get back up immediately. The warning wasn't casual, it was urgent, as if his body had crossed a dangerous line without permission. Nemu named the problem as magic sickness and explained how ambient magical energy could overwhelm someone's condition. Garen reeled when she implied he had magical power. Nemu apologized for putting him in danger and insisted she'd find another way. Fumir suggested Nemu use healing magic if things turned bad, but Garen refused to stop. He insisted the goal was important enough to risk for and kept pushing forward. Even while stubborn, he still apologized and thanked Nemu, acknowledging her worry. Without speeches, they kept working through the night. Garen's posture stayed low and strained, hands repeatedly returning to the ground. Nemu and Fumir remained close, watching the effort continue in silence, as if words would only waste what little time remained. Near dawn, Garen declared the next try would be the last attempt. He asked why Fumir would go this far, and admitted the motive resonated with him. Then he asked the real question, who the medicine had originally been meant for. Fumir answered with a memory. The medicine was for its child, meant to cure magic sickness. Garen absorbed it quietly, then made a promise out loud. He would find it no matter what. The vow sounded less like confidence and more like necessity. Nemu spoke to Fumir with a restrained softness, asking that her thanks and apology be passed on. Fumir accepted and told them a friend would handle payment. Before the moment ended, it instructed them to take the vial and bring its body back. They stated plainly that Fumir had passed, and Nemu panicked over Garen's condition, warning he was near his limit. She tried to pull him up, but he resisted, demanding a little longer. The fear wasn't spoken. His collapsing stamina showed it. Garen insisted he meant his promise and admitted he'd thrown himself away for someone else before. He reflected on how hard it was not being able to rely on anyone or ask for help. The confession landed between gasps, shaped by exhaustion. A hard truth surfaced. No one could hear what the dead truly wanted. As corpse bearers, you could at least hear the family's feeling. This time, they claimed, they heard it properly. Garen's digging resumed, driven by that belief. Garen declared he would absolutely keep his promise. Nemu answered with force. She would pull him up, no arguments, and she would decide the moment he hit his limit. Garen thanked her, but her control of the situation was unmistakable. Garen admitted he'd talked big, but his body was failing. He said his vision was getting blurry and breathing was becoming difficult. Even so, he pushed for one more effort, dragging himself forward as if stopping would undo everything he'd promised. When the group reunited, Garen apologized for keeping them waiting. Close hands handled the small vial, treating it like something fragile and priceless. The focus wasn't on celebration, it was on confirming what they had, as if doubt still hovered. Garen finally said it clearly. He had found it. The response was simple and exhausted agreement, followed by a decision to head back. The night of effort closed with action rather than relief, like they couldn't afford to relax yet. Indoors, someone looked down at a covered figure and asked if the others recognized him. They spoke of a famous elf searcher who had vanished about 100 years ago. A document was held up as a solution, implying Fumir's legacy mattered. A glasses-wearing clerk checked on them and questioned whether they were truly alright. The exchange stayed formal, with talk of payment and contact later. The tone suggested business as usual, even while Garen looked visibly worn down. Back home, Garen decided it was time to eat and sleep. Relieved a recovery medicine had helped, he eyed a freshly baked meat pie and hesitated, thinking about sharing. Then the knocking started, and he tried to ignore it. Briefly, the knocking turned into violent banging that shook the door. Garen snapped, shouting back while rushing toward the entrance. Whatever rest he'd planned evaporated, replaced by raw irritation and alarm as the noise demanded an immediate answer. The door opened to a towering elf woman, muscular, calm, and dressed with an apron and cloak. She filled the doorway without effort. Garen's body language froze in place, as if the size and stillness alone warned him not to resist. She addressed him directly, asking if he was Garensis, and he answered nervously. Then she ordered both of them to keep their mouths closed. Garen protested, but her grip and posture made it clear she was in control of the situation. She commented on the nice smell inside, and Garen admitted he'd been cooking. She called out for Miss Nemu and greeted them bluntly. When Garen demanded answers, she repeated the command to stay quiet and announced they were going through. As they moved inside, someone shouted for the door to be closed properly. The hallway emptied, and the door shut with a final sound. The complaint lingered behind them, marking the moment the outside world was cut off. In a formal room, Garen spoke up with a strained "excuse me," while the host fumbled for words. Tea and small tarts sat prepared like this had been planned. Garen demanded clarity, forcing the meeting to finally reveal its purpose. Come. The towering elf woman stated she had a request. She admitted she was short on time and apologized for how forceful the invitation had been. Then she asked for a bodyguard to accompany her research, implying the destination would be dangerous. The answer arrived as a blunt image and a single statement. The destination was inside the belly of a whale. The scale of the creature dwarfed everything, turning the request into something surreal and physical at once, with no room left for doubt. Nemu sat slumped against the rocky ground, her breath heavy as she stared ahead. After a tense silence, she leaned forward and spoke softly, noticing movement from someone nearby. The moment landed plainly. The other person was finally awake. CD knelt in front of them and demanded to know what had been done. He shifted into explanation, describing how gravekeepers don't just keep intruders away, they also perform final check. Far behind him, the one who had been downed remained on the ground. A whale silhouette framed the rules of entry, with its criteria still unknown. CD explained that the whale itself functioned as a gatekeeper, while the gravekeepers used magic to evaluate risk. The danger he named wasn't physical damage, it was an explosion of Before it could spiral, a tall armored woman stepped in and shut the bully down. She pointed out the apology had already been made, and refused to let height or appearance become an excuse for cruelty. Her calm tone carried authority, forcing the aggressor to face consequences. The bully tried to redirect his aggression, barking at Garen like he owned the corridor. Garen raised a hand and demanded both sides stop. The man rambled about weaklings and demanded sincerity, but the crowd's mood shifted. Nearby voices called him hot-headed. With the danger passing, the shaken victim thanked the armored woman. She brushed it off and introduced herself as Cinnamon, claiming anyone would have done the same. Garen returned the introduction, and CD followed, formally presenting Miss Nemu. In the middle of chaos, a new ally took shape. CD decided to wake him, stating with certainty that he wouldn't explode right now. He addressed Nemu by name, then added a caution that sounded like policy. Better to be careful. The choice was made, and the next action aimed straight at forcing consciousness back. The world turned harsh and violent in rapid beat. Impacts crashed again and again, the word smash repeating like a hammer. A single wide eye cut through the darkness, registering the assault. Whatever method was used to wake him, it wasn't gentle. A wide eye cut through the dark. A battered face surfaced from the black, dirt and damage clinging to him. Large, jagged text filled the space behind, while his expression below snapped into stunned awareness with sweat on his skin. The violence ended only because waking finally. Light returned as CD acknowledged the result, relieved that he was awake. Nemu sat nearby as the newly conscious man blurted confusion about a check. CD confirmed the final check was done, and the man admitted he'd just lived through a terrifying dream. He asked if he passed, and CD answered yes without hesitation. CD summarized the check's purpose, and relief flooded the awake man's posture. Nemu didn't linger on it. She pushed them forward, insisting they bury quickly. With that, movement replaced recovery. They entered a strange graveyard formed by towering root-like structures. Sidi identified the place immediately, then pointed them toward the destination that mattered most. The direction was specific and personal. Fumir's family was waiting somewhere inside. At the gravesite, Sidi commented on corpse bearers handling burials too. Nemu answered with a practical refusal to leave it all to gravekeepers, while Sidi called it an exception. The remains were positioned near the hollowed roots, and the work continued with the purpose was stated plainly: deliver the remains back to the family. Nemu tied it to what corpse bearers do, calling it bringing souls. Garen echoed the role, reinforcing it as their job. Then a small cue, footstep and a brief "oh" hinted at something unseen. Soft light filled the graveyard, and Garen called it beautiful while Nemu looked up. Sidi concluded the process with a clear declaration: the burial was complete. He added the final confirmation that mattered here: the whale had accepted him. The task was They clasped their hands in a prayer-like posture near the marker. Nemu noticed something off and asked what was wrong, while the others prepared to move. The brief pause wasn't about hesitation, it was about how the ritual was done and what it might mean. The brief pause wasn't. Nemu examined the hand positioning and said it differed from what she knew. She pointed to two sides, this world and the other world, using the gesture as a bridge. She admitted she didn't know much about elves, but suggested the hands formed a path for the soul to pass through. Sidi answered with a simple agreement, then voiced a hope that the deceased could meet his family over there. Immediately after, he returned to caution, admitting it might be nosy but insisting care mattered. The burial was finished, yet his vigilance didn't ease. But insisting. A quiet close-up held on Nemu's face as the conversation cooled. A line landed like a shared rule. Some things went without saying. Sidi started a sentence with only a single word before it cut away, leaving the moment suspended rather than fully explained. Nemu finally broke the pause with a small opener and a steadier expression. Garen answered that he would manage somehow, even with sweat still on his face. Side by side they walked through the root-filled path, the simplest question guiding them forward: should they go? Sidi watched from the foreground while the settlement came into view. He called the scene nice, then wondered aloud whether he could make friends if he went outside. A caption named the place directly as the Gravekeeper Settlement, framing the next phase as social, not violent. Food arrived in careful servings, labeled and distinct between Nemu and Garen. A cheerful thanks for the meal kicked things off, and the conversation turned into taste, heat, sweetness, and thick sauce. The stew's name repeated across the page, making the meal feel like a local staple. The table scene widened to include the weight of attention. They noted that everyone was staring and that nobody approached to talk. Sidi explained outsiders rarely came here, and the staring made sense in that context. Even so, the talk kept drifting back to seasoning and food. Sidi spoke with ambition, saying study could lead to making medicine and that land held knowledge he didn't have. Then he turned the question outward, asking whether they wanted to go see the world beyond the whale. Nemu didn't answer directly. She asked what made him hesitate. The page filled with imagined voices, fear of the outside, praise for Sidi's medicine, demands and expectations. Sidi admitted he might cause worries if he left, and his thoughts trailed into what happens if he isn't there. Nemu's question sharpened the issue. Were they against it? Garen cautioned that pushing someone to leave could be irresponsible, but he didn't shut it down. Instead, he urged Sidi to at least talk to the chief, pointing out that Sidi already knew what he wanted. Sidi repeated the desire softly, then asked if it was truly fine to be set down first. Garen challenged the doubt. Why wouldn't it be fine? The tone lightened as Nemu pushed food towards Sidi, telling him to try it. Sidi's answer was immediate and repeated, it was good. The simple approval landed like relief, grounding bigger questions in a small shared moment, and repeated, it was good. They gathered at the exit with a line of gravekeepers watching. Nemu thanked them for everything, and the response came back with casual certainty: they would probably meet again. The farewell wasn't dramatic, just steady and communal, as if partings here were always handled with restraint. Someone called Sidi by name and invited him to contact them if he ever came out. Garen waved goodbye and praised the food directly, sealing the bond through something simple and real. The exit space framed the separation as they stepped away, leaving the invitation behind. 4 days later, they returned to the lounge where Musette waited. She began with a calm lead-in and greeted them back as if the timing was expected. Garen confirmed they were back, Nemu echoed it, and the scene snapped from whale graveyard silence to a polished room again. Musette's eyes narrowed with immediate curiosity. She asked who the person behind them was, shifting the focus from the mission's completion to an unexpected presence. Nemu's reaction came as a stunned pause, her short response showing she didn't anticipate. Impact lines burst as Garen and Nemu jolted from a sudden strike or shove. A loud call of Sidi's name filled the moment, and then the answer appeared with a grin. Sidi stepped forward and announced himself plainly, turning the behind-you question into a real complication. In the open landscape, the group gathered and raised their hands, signaling they meant no further fight. Nemu thanked Cinnamon directly, and someone praised Cinnamon's help. Cinnamon accepted the moment with calm finality and announced she would be on her way, ending the alliance. Garen is abruptly confronted with paperwork and a new mission, still reeling from how he ended up here at all. A brief memory flashes of the chief's pushy send-off. While City inspects the document with visible confusion, Garen realizes the assignment was. The chief's loud confidence lingers like an echo, even as Garen reads the note about City's usefulness. The room settles into decision mode. Garen turns to Nemu for direction, but the question lands on City instead, forcing them to state what they truly want. City steps forward with a clear request: follow them both and learn the outside world firsthand. Nemu doesn't refuse, but sets a hard condition: if City can't prove practical value, they won't be carried. The moment ends with an uneasy agreement. Practical value, they won't be carried. City laid out the worst case. Inside the whale, people could become unstable without warning. He said motives often came from wonder or revenge, and triggers were unpredictable. Because of that uncertainty, strangers were judged dangerous and disposed of. Nemu pressed him on what that judgment meant. Nemu answered with a blunt counterpoint: if nothing was wrong, waking up should be normal. City refused the assumption, implying that true danger meant never waking again. The warning sat between them, drawing a line between ordinary sleep and something far more final. The focus shifted to the unconscious man. CD compared him directly to the unstable cases, while a narration line stated he was suppressing emotions by sheer willpower. The question became immediate and ugly: whether he would be disposed of. Nemu's resistance came fast. Footsteps and routine carry them forward, without major trouble. The environment seems to ease just enough for a break. A small fire marks their pause, and the chapter's tension dips briefly. For now, the journey feels almost too smooth to be trusted. During the rest, Garen openly praises City's performance. City credits the team's pace and admits this is their first real time applying this knowledge. They explain they're not exceptional at raw magic, but at practical medicine. Even so, Garen can't hide. Cooking and magic get compared as City explains reconstruction through controlled mixing. The method sounds simple, but the requirement isn't. Without trained hands and control of magical energy, it's difficult to replicate. Garen, curious and tempted, gratitude passes back and forth as City and Garen acknowledge each other's help. Nemu recognizes City's magical medicine as genuinely impressive, but points out the cost. A fresh burn is already destined to become a scar. The visuals shift to damage. Nemu quietly questions whether magic medicine can truly fix certain harm. Garen immediately pushes back, insisting Nemu should believe in themselves more. Nemu concedes the point, and City is thanked for their support. The mood steadies, but the next challenge waits ahead. The group reaches a brutal sight, an expanse below that churns with dangerous heat. The surface looks nothing like what they expected. Someone voices that the reality doesn't match the briefing. Another bluntly calls it bad, and the team's earlier confidence starts to. A formal explanation cuts in as the round glasses clerk clarifies the site is a volcano, and the remains are far past halfway. The document holds specifics, but the warning is direct. Past a certain point, the ground becomes extremely hot. Countermeasures aren't optional. Standing before the bubbling terrain, Nemu calls out how misleading the extremely hot label really was. They argue the reports rarely match reality and propose retreat to rethink. The heat looks lethal. Still, City insists the opportunity may not return. Nemu's resolve locks in now or never, and they will bring the deceased back. The crossing is clearly too wide for comfort, and jumping is debated. Someone notes the danger of being exposed mid-air. The group stops theorizing and starts needing a real, workable plan. Garen points toward insulating and fireproofing potions as the only way through. City answers by presenting what they brought, though uncertainty lingers. Can these potions really let someone enter magma safely? City notes they were expensive, and admits. City offers an upgrade: modify the potions to increase effectiveness. The question is whether they can truly pull it off under pressure. Nemu doesn't hesitate. They want every possible advantage. City agrees immediately, and the team's strategy shifts from debate to preparation. Nemu takes the lead in gathering unusual materials, asking for lava rock to be cracked open. Inside is a mimic insect built to resemble the terrain. Nemu explains how its parts can be used and expands into how local creatures function in the ecosystem. The potion work becomes methodical. Nemu crushes shells in the nest, while City organizes thermal materials and directs the process. Garen supports with equipment and follows instructions to stir at the right time. The mixture changes, and the next ingredients go. The enhanced potion is complete, labeled clearly as makeshift insulation and fireproofing. Then the problem hits. Only enough for one person. Garen volunteers immediately. City shuts it down and claims the role instead, turning the decision. City argues they should go because they made the potion. Nemu cuts through that logic with a single claim of responsibility. They take the task for themselves and declare it their job. The choice is final, and the crossing becomes real the moment Nemu steps forward. Nemu enters the hostile terrain and answers Sidi's question with stubborn calm. They admit the heat is still there, but insist they can endure it. Strain shows as they push onward through bubbling danger. Garen watches and doubts creep into his question. Even as Sidi tries, the situation turns sharply worse. Garen shouts for Nemu as the magma visibly rises. He yells urgent warnings that it's climbing fast, pushing Nemu to hurry. The environment itself becomes a moving threat, closing the window for success with every second. Nemu shouts a single priority, take the remain. While the danger surges, Garen reaches out with desperate insistence for Nemu's hand. Sidi mirrors the movement, both of them fully committed to pulling Nemu back. The rescue becomes the only thing that matters. Hands lock and Nemu is hauled upward as magma splashes and the heat overwhelms. Someone cries out that it's hot, and frantic checks follow. Are they alright? Can they stand? A strained yeah comes back. The team chooses retreat immediately, moving away. Back in Safer Rock, the group collapses into exhausted relief. They admit it was intense, and that they barely managed. Nemu asks what they think, then frames the danger as normal for this work. Even so, Nemu openly admits it was scary, revealing the cost beneath the job. Sidi makes a decision that changes the team's shape going forward. They want to come along with Nemu. Nemu accepts, and Sidi says they're counting on them. A handshake seals it. Garen's loud agreement breaks the heaviness, turning survival into a shared commitment. At a guild counter, the Owl Mask courier confirms the retrieval and presents a compiled report. The round glasses clerk acknowledges the success and asks how the crossing was done. When magma is mentioned, the clerk repeats it back, processing how extreme the sight. The explanation highlights the key factor. A companion improved a magic potion for the job. Someone reacts in surprise at the idea, but the follow-up makes it sound plausible given the companion's knowledge. The clerk decides to share the report with the guild. Thanks are exchanged to close the handoff. Alone at her desk, the round glasses clerk reads and reflects. The report pushes her into disbelief. Hundreds of years of danger, and someone returns from a volcano with another person, powered by only a single magic potion. The moment ends on quiet astonishment, as Nemu tastes the pie and admits it's good, the simplest relief of the day. Sidi thanks them, and Garen urges Sidi to eat too. Nemu's gratitude follows, and she even allows help cutting the meat, ending the night on shared care instead of conflict. Nemu gripped her weapon with both hands, tension visible in the hold. Her face hardened, and she declared she would wreck the place before leaving. The statement wasn't abstract. Her posture and clenched grip made it feel immediate and real. The statement wasn't abstract. At the counter, a furious client explodes, accusing the hooded corpse-bearer of fraud. The insults come fast, and the accusation is blunt. She never searched properly. Garen steps in, hand raised, trying to stop the situation from boiling over. The client insists money buys results, but the corpse bearer snaps back that she searched every matching location. He demands another attempt. She offers a deal, one more search, and if nothing turns up, she'll admit defeat and pay the full amount. And if she agrees to go again and demands witnesses, Garen and Sidi are pulled into the role as proof of what happens next. The client still spits venom, calling corpse bearers thieves, and Garen shoots back that this prejudice has never changed. The destination appears an ominous volcanic opening in a jagged landscape. Nemu identifies it plainly, leaving no room for doubt. Garen pushes the group onward, and Sidi confirms they understand. Nemu lays down strict rules about staying together and obeying orders. Inside the rocky passage, Garen's instincts flare as he picks up a strange smell. Nemu explains it's volcanic gas, and warns the concentration can turn toxic. Everyone is told to stay alert. Sidi, strangely energized by the danger, keeps moving, while Garen checks on them. The air worsens fast enough that even breathing becomes a problem. Sidi stops the group and hands out coverings for their mouth. Garen admits it's harsher than expected, but they press on. Sidi's prepared treatment makes movement easier, and the group regains momentum. They sit with the bleak truth that nothing looks promising, yet insist they'll find it anyway. The client's refusal to accept failure hangs over them. Garen calls out the pattern of letting violence happen. Nemu is addressed directly, and the tension tightens again. Sidi finally asks the question underneath everything. Why are corpse bearers hated this much? Garen admits he can understand some of it, but what adventurers showed them was excessive. He brings up what happened at the guild, preparing to explain where the stigma. Garen confesses he barely talks to others anymore, which makes answers harder to find. Nemu presses him to tell what he knows anyway. He starts with an old tale passed down mouth to mouth, warning it isn't pleasant, as their simple rations sit beside them like quiet proof of travel. The story unfolds. A king orders a virtuous corpse bearer to retrieve a hero's body, under cruel coercion. As time passes, others exploit corpses for profit. In a world overrun with monsters, corpse bearers become target, discriminated against, scorned, labeled as plunderers. The tale darkens into plague, shown through choking shadows and swarming flies. The devastation isn't described as distant theory, it's presented as a defining horror. The imagery lingers long enough to explain why fear would attach itself to anyone who moves. Back in the present, the word plague hits like a shock, raising the dread of a town ending overnight. The narration confirms the worst. The plague spread instantly and erased an entire kingdom. Garen and City react in stunned silence, grasping how legends get weaponized. Garen names the story, then notes his version focuses on someone who spread the plague out of resentment. The narration turns to consequence. Corpse bearers are accused of bringing maladies back, and fear becomes hatred. Distorted retellings multiply as the tale is passed along again. Garen names the story, then notes his version focuses on someone who spread the plague out of resentment. The narration turns to consequences. Corpse bearers are accused of bringing maladies back, and fear becomes hatred. Distorted retellings multiply as the tale is passed along again and again. Nemu warns them not to enter the adventurers' main hangout because they'll be driven out on sight. She cuts off the talk, and narration notes adventurers train harshly to stay healthy. Then Nemu falters, turning with a quiet question, as if something's gone wrong. Garen and City admit they can't accept the cruelty behind this prejudice. Nemu trails off, unable to justify it cleanly, then forces the moment forward. She tells them to move, ending the discussion. The choice feels practical, but the bitterness doesn't disappear with her word. The scene snaps back to the counter, where the client erupts at the failure. He screams that they couldn't find it, and hurls insults like weapons. Nemu stands in front, Garen and City behind her, as the air turns dangerous in the space of a breath. The client's anger becomes violence. His fist crashes into Garen's face, and Garen drops hard, choking on the impact. The insult follows immediately, as if the punch wasn't enough. The moment redraws the line. This isn't just abuse, it's an assault in public. The client rants at full volume, demanding competence and shouting about who he is. He claims he's doing them a favor by giving them work, then pivots to money and inheritance. Without a body, he says, he can't claim it, and he blames them for everything. Pivots to money and inheritance. Without a body, he says, he can't. Garen looks up, and that alone provokes the client. He screams about the look on Garen's face, calling him a mere corpse seeker. The client demands respect and dominance, trying to crush any hint of judgment. Garen's silence becomes the next excuse for rage. The client lunges past words and grabs Nemu, wrenching her arm upward. Her masked face is forced into frame as the grip tightens. Garen stares up from below, eyes wide, realizing the target has shifted from humiliation to control. Nemu admits she can't move her hand as pain breaks through her restraint. The client clicks his tongue and offers a shallow apology for failure, trying to twist the narrative. Then, authority steps in. A clerk notes they have a witness, and insists a promise must be honored. In tight close-ups, the client leans in with a threat, demanding understanding. His words imply escalation if they push further. Nemu's eye is shown wide, trapped in the moment. The intimidation hangs heavy, but it also signals he knows this. The client snaps, swatting away contact and shouting insults as he retreats. He curses, calls them filth, and spits swindlers and trash toward the door. The exit is loud and messy, like a tantrum slammed into wood, leaving the room raw in the silence. With the client gone, the clerk apologizes and says she'll handle what needs settling. She tells them not to worry about the dispute and orders them to go home for the day. When Nemu tries to downplay it, the clerk cuts in. This isn't negotiable. The clerk focuses on injuries, telling both of them to get treated. She calls City by name, and he stiffly agrees to help. Nemu moves to leave, and the clerk adds a practical order. Miss Nemu will need a magic potion, and she'll bring it later herself. Practical order. Miss Nemu. They regroup in a calmer place, checking for lingering pain. City asks about discomfort, and Nemu answers politely that she's fine. Someone lines up Garen next, and the talk turns to how hard that punch landed. The wallop is acknowledged, not dramatized. Nemu flinches silently, and Garen catches it. He turns back, confused, then calls her name and points out how incredible magic healing is. Nemu asks if it truly doesn't hurt, testing the reassurance. The focus shifts from conflict to the fragile process of recovery. Nemu quietly processes his answer, while Garen insists she's okay. Then he draws a firm boundary. She shouldn't let people hit her on purpose. He proposes handling violence differently from now on. Mid-thought, something clicks, and he bolts off, telling her to wait. And Garen returns with food and announces it like a small victory, a meat pie baked before their whale graveyard trip. He says it'll keep a few more days, and Muset confirms she cast a preservation spell. Garen invites everyone to eat together and offers a slice to Nemu. spell. Garen inside a simple room, a widow presented the strange proof left behind, money placed where her husband should have been. Nemu's cloaked presence held steady while the others listened. The scene made it clear this wasn't a routine job. Someone had disturbed a grave on purpose. As the widow explained her husband's unusual power, the conversation tightened into a lead. The group pointed toward an underground fighting arena far to the northwest. Politics made direct action difficult, and the widow's words framed questions pressed into the details. Why would someone powerful be buried in an ordinary family site at all? The widow explained it was his choice, and that precautions had been taken. Then she admitted something had gone wrong, turning the situation from the search leads them into harsh, rocky terrain where exhaustion and bad information collide. Talk turns bitter, mocking reliance on magic tombs. Someone checks on an injury and brushes it off, but CD recoils at the twisted reasoning being used to justify all of this. As they move through the ravine, they admit the request details were garbage, vague descriptions and shallow hints. Nemu points out that corpse bearers are the ones forced into impossible conditions. Even so, she notes at least some information finally surfaced, however late it came. Nemu reframes it coldly. The mere existence of a request can be enough to force action. CD answers with determination, promising they'll do their best to find what's missing. The conversation trails into a pause, as if everyone senses the real conflict isn't in the rock. An announcer whipped the audience into a frenzy, pushing the match as spectacle. A late entry was introduced, drawing attention before a single strike landed. The tunnel opened like a stage entrance, and the arena's excitement carried the pressure of expectation. Nemu stepped out with a long weapon and a ragged cloak, small against the scale of the ring but instantly commanding attention. Her name was shouted with the kind of intensity that sounded like reputation. She didn't perform, she simply stood ready, letting silence speak. Memes. A massive opponent was introduced, Morty built like the crowd's idea of violent. The match line was drawn in the space between them. Nemu's stance stayed tight and controlled. The pause before movement felt like the last calm breath before impact. The last calm breath before... Morty surged in first, trying to crush the opening exchange with sheer force. Nemu answered with one clean strike. The giant dropped fast, and the suddenness made the arena's build-up look almost ridiculous. Nemu's reaction stayed blunt, more puzzled than triumphant. The announcer screamed the result and crowned her the winner, turning the claps into celebration. Nemu didn't linger on the applause. She turned away and headed back through the tunnel, moving like the match was only a step toward what she actually came for. The arena's back halls were colder and quieter, and the rules felt more real there. Nemu returned to the waiting area where the others were already watching for her. They welcomed her back, and she answered simply, as if nothing about this place deserved extra word. They traded information in the waiting room, comparing what they'd learned. The story being spread around the arena sounded uniform, like everyone was repeating the same version. Nemu listened with narrowed focus, letting the pattern reveal what the words were trying to hide. The group's suspicion grew. The tournament didn't feel fair or clean, and the way people talked about the prize felt rehearsed. Instead of chasing arguments, they tightened their goal: keep moving through the matches, find where the remains were kept, and leave. A plan took shape around timing and access. Nemu would fight enough to stay inside the system while the others looked for openings. Every choice was framed around retrieval first. Even in a room meant for rest, the posture and silence showed they were preparing for trouble. In a corridor away from the crowd, a grinning organizer approached Nemu like this was casual business. He spoke with confidence, as if the building already belonged to him. Nemu faced him without flinching, weapon still part of her silhouette, waiting for the real demand. The offer came as pressure dressed up as negotiation, money, and the expectation she would throw a fight. The organizer acted certain that cash was the only language that mattered here. Nemu's restraint held, but her stare suggested she... Back in the ring, a new opponent pressed in hard, attacking with eager aggression. Nemu absorbed the opening sequence with tight defense, taking the force without giving ground. The opponent looked energized by the clash, while Nemu's focus stayed practical and the fight kept grinding forward. The opponent stayed loud and confident, crowding in with pressure, but Nemu's responses remained controlled. Even when blades met, her posture showed she was measuring timing, not trading pride. Between exchanges, the arena's purpose felt clearer. This wasn't just entertainment, it was control, money, and something being guarded behind the scene. The way information was framed suggested bait and profit more than honor. Nemu stayed locked in. The pressure continued, but Nemu's expression began to sharpen into decision. The widow's plea lingered in the background of everything she did here, tying each strike to a promise made outside the ring. This fight wasn't a sport, it was an obstacle in her way. Promise made outside the ring. A close-up of the widow's tears anchored what was at stake. Her grief wasn't abstract, it was visible in shaking hands and wet cheek. The moment made the remains feel heavier than any prize. It clarified why Nemu couldn't afford to simply play along. The match snapped back into motion, and the opponent rushed again. Nemu's stance shifted from endurance to intent. The next exchange didn't look like survival anymore, it looked like a choice being made in real time, with her body committing before her face softened at all. Nemu struck with brutal finality. The opponent's arm was severed, and blood and shock filled the moment immediately. His confident expression collapsed into panic as the missing limb registered. The action didn't read as showmanship, it read as a clean decision to end the threat. She stepped in and kept him pinned, controlling the aftermath with weight and position. The opponent's face tightened with strain as he lay helpless beneath her. The imbalance became undeniable. Nemu was steady and upright, while he could only react. The fight ended with the opponent broken and unable to continue. Nemu backed off with the same restraint she'd fought with, as if the outcome itself mattered less than what it allowed her to do next. The arena moved on quickly, treating brutality like routine. Outside the ring, movement and reactions suggested a disturbance spreading through the corridors. Nemu slipped back toward the others, the shift from public spectacle to cramped shelter happening fast. The return didn't feel like rest, it felt like regrouping before escalation. Her companions greeted her at the door, calling her by name and welcoming her back. Nemu answered simply that she was back, insisting she was fine, but the dirt and stains on her cloak told a harsher story than her words did. Was fine, but the food and cups sat out like a forced attempt at calm, but the conversation stayed tactical. The group shared what they'd learned about where things might be stored and how security looked. Nemu ate without relaxing, listening like someone already prepared. A layout explanation made the building feel like a design trap. Routes, guards, and choke points that controlled who could leave. The visuals emphasized how easily exits could be locked down. The more they mapped it out, the more escape sounded like a fight of its own. The plan turned into coordination: create an opening, get the remain, and signal when it was time to move. Nemu listened, then interrupted with a shift in tone. Her expression tightened, implying she wanted more than a clean getaway. Nemu laid out the plan with sharp urgency. The moment the remains were secured, Garen demanded a signal so he could create an opening. CD agreed to wait near the exit. With roles set, Nemu cut the talk short and pushed them to move. Create an opening. CD agreed to wait. CD forced his way through a packed crowd where bodies pressed too tight to breathe. People shouted for others to wait as the flow jammed. A smaller figure stumbled and apologized repeatedly, swallowed by the crush, while CD tried to keep moving without losing sight of the goal. The crowd turned hostile fast when a larger man snapped at CD and twisted the situation into an insult. CD denied it, but the confrontation held. Garen told Miss Nemu to wait, then went to pull CD out, while Nemu locked onto the aggressor and called him out directly. The grief finally broke into anger. A slammed fist and a trembling expression showed how personal this was. Whoever took the body hadn't just stolen remains, they shattered the widow's last attempt at peace. The room felt small under the weight of that confession. The request became raw and direct. The widow bowed and begged for her husband to be brought back, repeating herself until pride didn't matter anymore. The others stayed close behind, silently backing the plea. The conversation stopped being about talk and became a commitment. The setting cut to a crowded underground venue where the grand prize was announced like a product. The presentation was polished and loud, but the framing felt transactional. Whatever this arena promised, it treated grief and power as currency, and the crowd ate it up. Cinnamon handed over a business card, offering her services as a bodyguard. A small attendant confirmed her name and answered obediently. Cinnamon then warned them bluntly, if they were here only for money, they should leave. The tournament's boss, Cinnamon doubled down on her worldview, declaring risk was necessary when money was involved. Others pushed back, calling her mistaken and telling her to accept reality. Even so, she didn't flinch. The words came out unrefined but certain, as if she'd already chosen. Cinnamon excused herself and promised a fair fight if fate placed them against each other. Staff shouted for the next competitors to prepare, and the crowd speculated about her refined presence. Cinnamon looked forward, without explaining. In the arena, Cinnamon recognized Nemu immediately and suggested surrender as if it were reasonable. She noted Nemu had won her last match and seemed unhurt. Nemu answered without giving ground. The exchange stayed polite on the surface, but the refusal made it clear. Cinnamon accepted the answer with a short final line, and Nemu shut the offer down just as cleanly. Their bodies tightened into fighting posture. The space between shield and weapon stopped feeling like distance and started feeling like a feud. They faced each other in a tense standoff, Cinnamon holding firm behind her shield. Nemu questioned why she wouldn't attack and warned she wouldn't hold back. Cinnamon calmly invited her to go first. The invitation wasn't generosity, it was confidence. Daring, Nemu exploded forward, closing the gap in a blink. Her strike slammed into Cinnamon's shield with a violent burst of force. The impact swallowed the arena in motion lines and shock, but Cinnamon held position, absorbing the hit without collapsing, as if the shield was. The pressure continued in the same brutal rhythm. Nemu kept driving power into the shield, and each collision erupted into another blast. Cinnamon stayed behind her defense, refusing to offer an opening. The fight turned into. Cinnamon deflected the attack again, and the repetition started started to feel deliberate. Nemu demanded to know why she wouldn't strike back. Cinnamon's silence and posture answered for her. She didn't need to chase offense, she was turning defense into control. Cinnamon finally explained. Her shield repelled what it received and guarded what lay within. The inscription framed it like a vow, and she claimed her opponents simply became unable to move. Nemu demanded to know how she'd advanced so far, but Cinnamon dismissed it as their words sharpened into judgment. Cinnamon called Nemu's growth predictable, while Nemu shot back that she'd been lucky. Then Nemu cut to motive, asking why she entered at all. Cinnamon answered without shame, money. The bluntness removed any illusion that this arena was about honor. Cinnamon's greed carried a larger claim. She needed funds to reclaim land and protect her people, and she said it like a contract. Nemu labeled her a fallen noble, and Cinnamon demanded Nemu's goal in return. The conversation stayed cold, each line stripped. Nemu revealed she wasn't here for pride, she was here for work. The family wanted the corpse recovered as a prize, and even Cinnamon seemed stunned, thinking it had been bought. From the crowd, the truth was stated plainly. Everyone knew it was stolen, the job wasn't hidden, the crime was normal. Nemu admitted this was her first time taking on something like this, and Cinnamon reacted in disbelief. Nemu confessed she assumed things would be fine. City pressed for proof of where the treasure room was, and Cinnamon pointed upward. The answer wasn't a rumor or a map. It was. Cinnamon explained the ceiling stone kept the entire structure stable. Without it, the unusual building would collapse on its own. She clarified it wasn't ordinary stone, but a composite with multiple abilities, something only serious wealth could obtain. Cinnamon tried to leave the discussion behind, but Nemu threw her earlier words back at her. Nothing ventured. Then smoke appeared, and distant voices warned of fire. The boss's name, Badengem, came up as someone likely to respond. The environment itself Cinnamon started to react, but the plans snapped into motion mid-sentence. Nemu moved with decisive force, grabbing the moment rather than asking permission. Cinnamon shouted instructions as she was lifted, launch her upward. The coordination was sudden, the kind that only Nemu shouted for speed while Cinnamon rose into the air, her words breaking into alarm as the ground fell away. The maneuver looked reckless, but it was controlled. The timing was everything. Cinnamon needed height, Nemu needed an opening, and the ceiling stone weighted like a single point. Nemu swung with full-body commitment and smashed into the ceiling magic stone. The impact burst outward in shards and violent crack, as if the building screamed through debris. The strike didn't end it immediately, but the damage was undeniable. Nemu assessed it coldly and tough. Even cracked, the stone resisted, holding together with stubborn strength. The sound effects and debris made it clear the structure was still fighting to remain intact, but the first hit had done its job. Once a flaw existed, Cinnamon checked on Nemu, and Nemu admitted she'd survived somehow. Cinnamon explained the shield could cushion because it protected what was inside, and Nemu accepted the help without ceremony. Then Nemu asked how it looked. Cinnamon answered honestly, this wasn't going to break in one clean hit. Cinnamon insisted it wouldn't be a problem. Nemu admitted the stone was tougher than expected and that she'd only managed to crack it. She offered to go again, but Cinnamon's explanation shifted the approach. Once a crack formed, Cinnamon proved it with a simple statement. Just like that, the stone began collapsing, the crack turning into a cascade. Nemu's quiet reaction showed surprise at how quickly the balance flipped. The building had been held up by one thing pretending to be permanent, and now that debris started falling, and the arena's tone snapped into panic. Nemu warned it was collapsed, and voices yelled to get out quickly. The escape became a stampede, no longer controlled by rules or match. The structure that had trapped people for profit was now forcing everyone. The boss's face twisted into hysteria as he screamed about the magic stone and his arena. His orders were immediate and revealing. Empty the vault first, push through the crowd, treasure room comes before anything else. Even as the build outside, angry pursuers shouted and cursed, calling Nemu a brat and yelling to hurry. One swore he'd never forgive her. Amid the chaos, a hand rose into view and someone called out for Miss Nemu. The escape wasn't clean. It was Nemu laid out the plan with sharp urgency. The moment the remains were secured, Garen demanded a signal so he could create an opening. CD agreed to wait near the exit. With roles set, Nemu cut the talk short and pushed them to move. CD forced his way through a packed crowd where bodies pressed too tight to breathe. People shouted for others to wait as the flow jammed. A smaller figure stumbled and apologized repeatedly, swallowed by the crush, while CD tried to keep moving without losing sight of the goal. The crowd turned hostile fast when a larger man snapped at CD and twisted the situation into an insult. CD denied it, but the confrontation held. Garen told Miss Nemu to wait, then went to pull CD out, while Nemu locked onto the aggressor and called him out directly. Before it could spiral, a tall armored woman stepped in and shut the bully down. She pointed out the apology had already been made and refused to let height or appearance become an excuse for cruelty. Her calm tone carried authority, forcing the aggressor to face consequences consequences instead of excuses. The bully tried to redirect his aggression, barking at Garen like he owned the corridor. Garen raised a hand and demanded both sides stop. The man rambled about weaklings and demanded sincerity, but the crowd's mood shifted. Nearby voices called him hot-headed as the tension finally broke. With the danger passing, the shaken victim thanked the armored woman. She brushed it off and introduced herself as Cinnamon, claiming anyone would have done the same. Garen returned the introduction, and City followed, formally presenting Miss Nemu. In the middle of chaos, a new ally took shape. Cinnamon handed over a business card, offering her services as a bodyguard. A small attendant confirmed her name and answered obediently. Cinnamon then warned them bluntly, if they were here only for money, they should leave. The tournament's boss, she said, was dangerously shady. Cinnamon doubled down on her worldview, declaring risk was necessary when money was involved. Others pushed back, calling her mistaken and telling her to accept reality. Even so, she didn't flinch. The words came out unrefined but certain, as if she'd already chosen hardship over hesitation. Cinnamon excused herself and promised a fair fight if fate placed them against each other. Staff shouted for the next competitors to prepare, and the crowd speculated about her refined presence. Cinnamon looked forward without explaining herself, noting her turn was coming next as the arena's momentum pulled her away. They hit ground hard inside a rocky interior. Garen coughs and shouts, while Nemu stays composed enough to talk, blaming the whale for the shock. Garen fires back with confusion, and Nemu answers with the same disbelief. The landing is real, and so is the place. A wide reveal opens into a vast cavernous space. Water, stone, and strange structures spread across the inside of the whale. A voice confirms what they've already feared. They've arrived. The belly isn't a metaphor or a threat anymore. It's a physical world. They try to steady themselves and decide to look around, but the first warning arrives fast. A spear slams into the ground near them, close enough to freeze movement. They react instantly, recognizing the weapon as a message. Whoever lives here noticed them immediately, recognizing the weapon. Figures appear above on ruined ledges, spears angled downward from multiple directions. Nemu reads the situation in one glance and admits it doesn't look welcoming. The height advantage and silent formation say enough. This isn't a place for visitors, and they've entered uninvited. And the confrontation becomes physical. Nemu is seized from behind, her arms pinned while Garen is forced to stay still. A voice praises compliance, calling it the correct move. With weapons surrounding them and bodies restrained, the ambush shifts into an arrest. Them and bodies restrained, the guards loom close, their gear and spears making escape look pointless. A large figure warns Garen not to do anything stupid, tightening the pressure. Garen's face shows the imbalance as he mutters that they're huge. The power gap is obvious, and it's enforced. Pressure. Garen's face shows that they're huge. The power talk replaces violence, but the suspicion stays sharp. They demand to know why a corpse bearer is here, and Nemu states her purpose: bury the deceased in the same grave as his family. The locals call it a special case and allow inspection of the remains, as if measuring the truth. An elder-like figure admits the guards attacked before explanations could happen. Then the label drops. This is the whale's graveyard. The group identifies themselves as the Gravekeeper tribe, claiming authority over what happens here. The place isn't random. They explain why the graveyard mattered. The remains they brought carry insanely high magical power, valuable enough to be stolen if buried normally. They describe a grim market, experiments, medicine, resale. The whale graveyard exists to prevent that, protecting the deceased from people who profit off. Tension flashes again as Nemu challenges them, asking if they want to fight and warning that nobody needs to get hurt. Garen protests that she was punched, and the other side concedes it's best to avoid injury. The elder promises help, saying City can guide them and prepare what's needed. They call for City, described as the physician, and more than that, a genius the tribe depends on. Weapons are ordered down so work can continue, talk later. But City isn't there. The group looks around, irritation growing, as they realize the key person is missing. They confirm it aloud. City's not here. The elder excuses it as a free spirit and shrugs off complaints, insisting genius comes with problems. Someone notes he's already out of sight, and the elder decides to chase him down. The wait feels brief, like a storm gathering. Out of sight, and the elder decides to chase him down. The storm hits in close quarters. A new figure suddenly fills the space, hand and body crowding into Nemu's range. A large demand cuts through everything, asking who they are. The narration admits it became a big deal fast, and the posture alone explains why. Garen checks on Nemu, and she answers that she's fine. Just before the newcomer forces medicine into her mouth, Nemu chokes out a muffled sound while Garen shouts for it to stop. Someone warns it could be poison, but Nemu signals she understands what's happening, even as she's held. The tribe catches up and reacts in disbelief, demanding to know why the newcomer is gripping Nemu and forcing medicine. The scene turns into accusations and shouting, the group closing in. Nemu remains pinned and unsteady, and the newcomer's blank calm makes the situation feel worse. A name finally snaps everything into place. Someone screams City, and the newcomer turns with a sharp look. Nemu hangs limp in the hold, her body heavy against City's arm. The moment confirms City isn't just a random aggressor, he's the person they were calling for. City isn't just a random aggressor, he's the person they were. The elder introduces him plainly. City, the tribe's brilliant physician. Nemu notes the voice is quiet, and someone says City is feeding the kid, suggesting the medicine had a purpose. City claims he has an emergency, but brushes off concern. The group shifts toward moving out. Medicine had a purpose. The elder reasserts control, calling Garen and Nemu intruders, and ordering City to guide them back to the graveyard. Then the threat lands cold and explicit, promising death if they try anything stupid. With that, the escort becomes official, and fear is replaced by strict. As they walk, the elder says anything else can be asked directly to City. Garen introduces himself as Garancy and offers Garen as the simpler name. City repeats Nemu's name aloud, then complains about being carried, asking to be put down. The group keeps moving. City's focus drifts to the outside world. He says he wants to study more and admits he's never left the whale before. Others react with surprise, asking questions about what he wants to learn. City seems pleased to meet outsiders and frames it as a chance to help more people. They stop to rest as City reflects on how things are and why people accept them. He says he's never even heard of anyone leaving the whale. Burial returns to the center. Someone can finally meet their family again. City adds he met this person before during a family's burial. The dead are remembered with simple clarity. Garen calls him a good guy and City agrees, adding that he was smart and kind-hearted. The tone stays steady, almost reassuring, as City concludes that's why it will be fine. The calm hangs just long enough to break. Garen collapses to the ground, face down and unmoving. A cut-off question hangs in the air as City sits nearby, watching with unsettling composure. Then City states it worked, and confirms it again with a quiet, "Yeah, whatever the medicine was meant to do, it took effect." City looks down with one eye hidden behind his bangs and gives a final instruction. He tells them to do their best, then emphasizes the real demand, to come back. The words land over the image of bodies on the ground, turning the job into a promise they must survive. Cinnamon gave her farewell with unexpected sincerity, admitting she'd been kept from straying off the right path. She insisted she should be the one thanking them and promised they would meet again. The trio answered with short affirmations, then turned their bodies toward home, letting the wind carry the goodbye behind them. The story returned indoors, where the recovered body lay on a bed. Miss Nemu stood nearby, in her beaked mask and cloak, unmoving, while the others remained close. The scene didn't celebrate. It confirmed the job's reality: wait, silence, and a task completed in the plainest way possible. At the family's bedside, the widow leaned over the body, her face shown in quiet close-up. A child stood nearby as the room held still. Small objects and hands entered the frame, but the focus stayed on presence, proof that the remains had returned, and that grief now had somewhere to settle. Later, Nemu sat writing the report, the work continuing even after the danger ended. Someone suggested heading home first, but the others chose to leave together. They talked about Cinnamon being there and noted her reason was money. The conversation framed it as likely they'd cross paths again. Cinnamon walked onward under open sky, reflecting that corpse bearers like Nemu existed after all. She admitted it would be nice to meet again someday. Then she snapped back into practicality, telling Mats it was time to earn money. Mats answered obediently, and they moved forward without looking back.